What a perfect afternoon for a bit of cemetery exploration. It's cold, it's wet, it's windy, and this is one of Sydney's most atmospheric cemeteries as well. This is my local, this is the Camperdown Cemetery, not far off the King Street Strip in Newtown. And for a time, this was the most important cemetery in Sydney. Something that's occurred to me during this past COVID year without very much travel is that cemeteries have been a very big feature of my travelling life. You know you're in for a treat here when you're greeted by this incredible Moreton Bay fig and the caretaker's residence. The fig is said to date back to the founding of the cemetery in 1848. Camperdown Cemetery was established after the cemeteries in the centre of Sydney started to buckle under the weight of a rapidly growing population. The end of convict transportation in 1840 saw a big spike in migration. Word was out back in England that this was a pretty good place to live, and the discovery of gold in the 1850s created a rush. About 18,000 residents and hopefuls are buried here. Among the hopefuls, the victims of Sydney's worst maritime disaster. They never quite made it. In August 1857, after months at sea, sailing from England, the Dunbar crashed on rocks at Sydney's South Head, killing all but one of its 122 passengers. Just imagine months at sea only to die in a raging storm metres from your destination. You know, I don't really find wandering around an old graveyard like this morbid at all. They feel like sort of historical ruins, really. And they're beautiful and atmospheric places too. This is a green space much loved by local residents and local birds. And an occasional reminder of the great levelling of mortality is a pretty healthy thing. A few months ago I made a video about St John's Cemetery in Parramatta, which is the oldest European cemetery in Australia, in a pretty dismal state of disrepair. But making that video, and since that time I've also been conscious of the fact that I've been visiting cemeteries around the world since I first stepped on an aeroplane and left Australia more than 3 decades ago. It's great to be getting to know Sydney properly again. And I feel like I'm coming at it as a bit of a stranger, having lived away for so long. That makes it feel even more special, and cemeteries are an interesting part of the puzzle. One of the most well-known colonial figures buried in Camperdown Cemetery is Thomas Mitchell. Mitchell was Surveyor General in New South Wales in the late 1820s and 1830s. It was a time when the agricultural economy was gaining momentum, and along with it, the seizure of Indigenous lands. Mitchell was skilled in mapping, road building, and he was the first white man to set foot in many areas of Eastern Australia. My generation learned of the glory of Australia's British explorers at school. We were in awe. But we didn't talk about British colonial interests or the seizure of Indigenous lands. It's also said that the character who inspired Mrs. Havisham in Dickens' Great Expectations is buried in this cemetery. Edmund Blackett, the architect who designed this church and the cemetery grounds, St Andrew's Cathedral in the centre of Sydney, the main quad at Sydney University, and other prominent buildings around town, has a headstone here, though his ashes are at St Andrew's Cathedral. Thanks for joining me for a little wander in Camperdown Cemetery. For more interesting Sydney stuff, head over to rustycompass.com.